Jacksonville. The child was born but couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. With Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history in this land of flowers.
The week one was from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We're moving along here in the we got about roughly 2 weeks left to the month of July. We're coming to you on the 21st of July 2018. We'll have a number of polls today to discuss. We'll have Uncle Carl Rove talking about money and campaigns, basically, from the Wall Street Journal. I have an interesting article here in the Washington Post about conservatives and taxes. If you recall, there's a big part of conservative campaigns have been under the marker of tax and spend, accusing, of course, the Democrats of being taxes and spending too much. This article from the very red state of Oklahoma, Jerry Pippin's state, talks about taxes and how taxes can be beneficial to the populace. So we'll look at it. It's very interesting. This particular person is running for governor of the state. And we'll look at Georgia, the Senate race there. One candidate is endorsed by DJ Trump. The other candidate on the Republican side is endorsed by Governor Dill, who is term limited there in the state of Georgia. And of course, Ms. Abrams is running against whomever the winner is in that race. We'll look at that. Still very tight race in the margin of error. And also we have the first part of the installment for our friends at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. And of course, we remember Heather Heyer, who was murdered by a white supremacist and at the alt-white rally. We talked about that on Friday Jobber last night. So we have a gang-packed agenda here, and also a Major League Baseball. It is back finally after the All-Star break, and we'll go over the scores there. So let's get right into it with our centerpiece, we'll call it. This is by Tim Craig of the Washington Post. In conservative Oklahoma, a Republican raises taxes, and many voters like it. This is Oklahoma City. Helen Swoopy, I suppose, considers herself a traditional Republican, skittish about paying higher taxes for what she can see the ever-growing role of government. Now, this is the other part of it. The anti-government people think, well, we'll starve the beast, therefore we'll contribute less taxes. That's the other side of DJ Trump's tax reduction program there, but it's a very complicated situation nonetheless. But after Oklahoma City spent hundreds of millions of dollars building new parks, bike trails, elite recreation facilities, and soon to be completed streetcar network. Many cities are doing that. Swoopy thinks maybe the state government can learn something from the cities. Former four-term mayor, that is Mick Cornett, I suppose, a leading Republican candidate for governor. The whole city has been transformed, as Swoopy said, who lives in the suburbs but now travels into the city each weekend to new indoor tennis courts paid for by the taxpayers. You get a lot of promises a lot of times and nothing happens, but now there's a lot of promises and things happen. Even as Republican voters nationwide continue to lunge to the right, Swoopy's assessment of Cornett's reflects a surprising trend in Oklahoma politics this year. The pro-government Republicans in making a comeback as GOP voters, at least in some areas or places, reject a hard anti-tax line. Well, one of the reasons for the rejection of the anti-tax line is that people are seeing now, particularly for education, they had a teacher strike there in Oklahoma, as they did in the Commonwealth of West Virginia, and in a number of other Republican states. Florida, for example, that teachers had not, Texas, that had not received a raise for roughly 1 or 2 decades, in other words, 10 to 20 years. So now they have a raise, and teachers, because they are at the ground level, the grassroots level, are still favored through their parent-teachers associations, their unions, etc., are now fighting back in an appropriate manner. And a majority of teachers are women, particularly in the primary grades. So we look at that also as a starting post. In Arizona, on to Ducey, they forced Ducey to finally sign the agreement, and that is affecting the race out in Arizona also. So we are seeing a spillage from many of these Republican-run states. At one time, Republican governors just ran and said, well, taxes spend, no new taxes. Well, what that means is no new development. You look at states that are low tax or no tax states, and there is very little development. You cannot have development, is very important, without a proper field of which to develop on. And you have to have amenities such as these tennis courts and various other things for people to do in the city, and enhance your infrastructure. A city that has absolutely no infrastructure, for instance, Flint, Michigan, they have to use bottled water there, cannot attract the type of industry they attract, because they should attract, because people simply do not want to move to a place that is a backwater. It looks like a third world S-hole country, a city. And this is what eventually happens. Not only does your infrastructure suffer, your public education suffers, your school buildings are decaying, the whole system is collapsing, therefore the education becomes a third rate. Teachers are leaving. So there's a whole chain of intended, not unintended, but intended consequences. You have less government, therefore you have less civilization to look at. This is one of the outcomes of that type of living very cheaply. And of course with states, they cannot run a deficit, therefore they have to balance their budget, as they did in Oklahoma, to find money for the increase pay for teachers. Teachers working 3 jobs, West Virginia another example, and teachers leaving the state. Teachers would go into teaching, get 1 year of experience, maybe 2 years, and leave the state or leave the profession. So this is a big blow in terms of training of future generations in many of these states. Companies that want to move there simply do not have the people available with the skill sets. So many of those companies have to set up apprenticeships, but still, if you have people so poorly educated, even these on-job training ventures are not as good as one can see. and at the same time you work through investment. You're not going to invest, many corporations are not going to invest in a state that has a backward education system. Now, there are a few. Example of what happened in Wisconsin under Boss Walker, and they were able to track Ho-Ho Industries or whatever of there in Milwaukee. But you still have a poorly educated workforce, and that will not take you into the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. As knowledge workers increase, you have to be able to get your knowledge workers from someplace. So examples of that, these basic tech zones, they have it in Boston, Austin, Texas, for instance, Silicon Valley, but those places are by and large importing workers from other jurisdictions. And in Silicon Valley, almost 80% of the workers are foreign born, or their parents were foreign born. So that sort of tells you what is being produced. When we get back to the article here, after years of upheaval in state government, including chronic budget shortfalls, and of this year's teacher walkout over low-pay Oklahoma Republicans have veered towards moderation, which will select 2 candidates for the urban centers. There's one named Kevin Stiffett, I guess, and Cornett. They'll be in the August 28th runoff. The election was a setback for the Tea Party, the Christian Coalition Movement, as Cornett and as STITT defeated 8 other Republican candidates, including the Lieutenant Governor Tom Lamb, who had sought to align himself with DJ Trump. The results was widely interpreted as a repudiation of Mary Farland, who pushed for income tax cuts, even as teachers and advocates decried cuts to state education funding. Farland is barred from seeking a 3rd term. Analysts and Oklahoma residents say that the outcomes also reflect a more fundamental disenchantment with the direction that the state government is becoming more divisive and under the sway of comparatively moderate voters in metropolitan areas. They're talking about the 2 largest cities. I think that a lot of the same sentiments that a lot of other people in Oklahoma do. Our senators, legislators, and governors have been so strong fighting against each other, nothing is really getting done. That is Ryan Coding, a 42-year-old Republican, said as he and his children were selling 100 bushels of corn last week at a roadside stand in suburban Oklahoma City. Sometimes you need to change. Cornett, the top vote getter, at just under 30%, prevailed, even though as mayor he pushed for higher taxes, questioned congressional efforts to harshly overturn the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, supported a local gay rights ordinance, co-wrote a letter with Bill de Blasio, he's the mayor of New York, urging the federal government to spend more money on transportation and public works projects. He also backed a state tax increase to pay for teachers' pay. Now this Stillett, I suppose, a political newcomer who founded a large mortgage company, campaigned more as a pragmatic conservative, won just less than a quarter of the vote. He secured a spot in the runoff, even though the Tulsa World reported that he failed to vote in the gubernatorial election dating back to 1999. His support for broad criminal justice restructuring, including freeing up some nonviolent offenders from prisons in Oklahoma, didn't seriously hamper him in the GOP primary. The two will probably emphasize conservative positions as the runoff nears, since it's expected to draw fewer voters who lean more conservative than in the June primary. The primary attracted more than 450,000 Republican voters, nearly double the turnout from 4 years ago. As Oklahoma also decides a referendum to legalize medical marijuana. It passed with 56% of the vote, even though a coalition of religious and conservative local sheriffs opposed it. They didn't know what they were doing. Primary voters also ousted two Tulsa area representatives who voted against the tax hike to fund pay raises. Several other anti-tax Republican legislators were forced into runoffs of more moderate challenges. The dynamic in Oklahoma echoes ongoing Republican battles in a neighboring Kansas. We reported on that before. In fact, a book was written about what happened in Kansas about the religious nuts. But in Kansas, on the brownback, they slashed taxes almost to zero, and the state went into deficit spending and became, as my old friend Jeannie Lyles would say, a mess. Another heavily Republican state where conservatives have faced backlashes over their refusal to raise taxes. In Oklahoma, the growth of the state's two largest cities, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, has strengthened the moderates' hand. The population of the Oklahoma City metro increased 10% to 1.3 million residents over the past decade. In areas close to downtown, well-educated millennials and Latinos, who make up more than half of the students in Oklahoma City public schools, are responsible for much of the population growth, according to city officials. Cornette, who was a popular TV sports anchor before being elected mayor in 2004, worked to diversify the economy, once heavily dependent upon natural gas and oil. He campaigned aggressively for 1 cent sales tax to fund $771 million in economic development and wellness projects. He also made headlines for inspiring a citywide diet in which he claimed 47,000 residents lost combined 1 million pounds. The revenue paid off a $228 million downtown convention center and nearly 70 acres of parks and a 7-mile streetcar system that connects downtown with neighborhoods that transformed it with new apartments and condominiums. Another $45 million was spent in constructing a man-made whitewater rafting and center, along with kayaking, along the waterfront, which is billed as the first facility of its kind in the heart of an American city. That's the sort of public works spending traditionally has not been associated with Republicans, but in last month's primary, Cornette racked up big margins throughout the 31-county Oklahoma City television area. Historically, we've been dominated by very conservative rural voters, but now our urban areas are changing, and Mayor Cornette represents that. In a western Oklahoma City neighborhood, 83-year-old Mary Perdue lives a few hundred yards from a new 8-mile bike path and walks that trail that connects several vehicle-centric neighborhoods of single-family homes, strip malls, and automotive dealerships and fast food restaurants. Although she considers herself a committed conservative, Perdue says she is supporting Cornette because of his creativity. He has done an excellent job as far as building downtown, and he's done what he set out to do. In an interview, Cornette said Oklahoma voters view spending on public education and healthcare, among things, as investment. Stipp hopes to distinguish himself from Cornette by opposing tax increases, which he thinks still resonate with rural voters. Well, the problem there is, and this is the Trump operation, you can get rural voters, but rural voters hold back progress. Bill Shepard, a premier pollster, says recent polls show that the state's Republicans have adopted a nuanced view of taxes, even though a plurality of Oklahoma Republicans say taxes are too high. Nearly two-thirds of them support tax increases to pay for teachers. Oklahoma Democrats appear to be rooting for Stipp, believing that Cornet's base in Oklahoma City would put the Democratic nominee, a former Attorney General, at a disadvantage. Many strategists think that Edmondson, who repeatedly challenged the tobacco industry and other corporations when he was Attorney General, would make the general election highly competitive. At the Oklahoma City Botanical Garden, Michael Dawson, 66, and his wife, Virginia, 65, said they remain undecided in the runoff. The Republican couple also isn't ruling out voting for Edmondson. So it's going to be a very interesting race. We are just very weary, of doing nothing in our state. Dawson said, we think we have the possibility of doing incredible things. So progress is being made, and progress is being talked about. And when you start to have that kind of a synergy, it's different. Let's go to Uncle Carl Rove. For more than a half century, he's writing in the Wall Street Journal, who is winning the midterm money race on the 19th of July. The former California treasurer, Jess Unruh. Remember Jess Unruh? Money is the mother's milk of politics. While better funded candidates aren't guaranteed victory, money is still a signal of strength. So who did last quarter's Federal Election Commission filing, which American House candidates recently submitted to say about the state of play? The Hill headlines are more than 50 Democratic challenges outraised Republican incumbents, likely thrilled Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. While accurate, the number needs context. Uncle Carl's drilling down here. Still, 6 of those Democrats are in 154 districts in the Cook Report. Calls a solid Republican. 6 are in 27 seat. He calls likely Republican. This is Mr. Cook. While 5 are in 26 states with lean Republican seats. Democrats raised the Republicans last quarter in 14 of 26 districts. The Cook Report called toss-ups. Yet Bloomberg found that in 18 toss-up districts where primaries have been held, Republicans had more cash on hand in 13. I would not doubt that. The Republicans had the biggest war chest in 4, as according to FCC. In 26 toss-up districts, leading Republican candidates have combined for $38.3 million cash on hand, while leading Democrats have $23.1 million. Moreover, Republicans have an advantage in outside money, no doubt about that. The Paul Ryan-inspired Congressional Leadership Fund, Super PAC, reported $71.4 million in cash. That's in June, June the 30th. The Democrats' counterpart only $16.7 million as of the 31st of May. The official party campaign committees have nearly equal amounts of cash. $60.9 million for the Republicans, $60.8 million for the Democrats. A lot of money here. Altogether, the GOP maintains an edge of outside money of $132.3 million to $77.3 million. Even so, money goes further when sent directly to campaigns. For example, candidates, unlike third-party groups, are guaranteed the lowest price for TV ads. The Republicans should pay attention to the Democratic congressional candidates who have succeeded in getting large numbers of small donations. Republicans usually don't work that way. Gained a tactical advantage in the 70s and 80s by perfecting direct mail. We now do it on the internet. Today, Democrats have an advantage by dominating online small donation fundraising for candidates and sending out thousands of emails. Since has done extremely well with virtual videos, causing motivated Democrats across the U.S. to contribute to House candidates who catch their eyes. One Democrat who mastered this is M.J. Haggard. That's the 31st District of Texas, a former Army helicopter pilot. Ms. Haggard used a short video to raise $750,000 over a 10-day period. A total of $1.1 million last quarter. The incumbent John Carter gathered only 267,000. The video which shares Hager's story of receiving a Purple Heart Distinguished Flying Cross during her free tours in Afghanistan ended with a gross exaggeration. Came to claim of being Hager's claim of being a consultant and veteran wasn't good enough to get the message with Carter during a lobbying trip. I guess I need to be a donor. But Carter did schedule a meeting with Ms. Haggard on the 26th of June 2013 when the congressman was delayed by voting in an appropriation committee meeting on nuclear security and infrastructure program. Ms. Haggard didn't wait. Her campaign has tried watering down her accusations. The video left her with 867,000 and Carter has 538. This is an outliner. In Texas, Republicans have more cash on hand in 3 of the other 4 Lone Star States House races. But one thing Uncle Carl doesn't say here, in Texas, business as usual. These Republicans have recaptured the districts. They have been Republican in Texas since LBJ, literally. And by using the no taxes, no spend type of theme, and also bolstered by rural Texas, that has kept the Republicans in control in Austin. And progressives there have had a hard time rallying, but it is moving because progressives govern the urban centers of Texas, i.e. Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, El Paso, you name it, any of the very large, and these are very, very large cities. Millions of people reside in Houston, the Dallas area there, etc. And the suburban areas that surround many of those, that is where the industry is. But they don't have a Mike Cornett. They do on the city level. They've not had one to succeed on the state level. Much of this is growing as a party, organizing grassroots in Texas. Hillary Clinton did better in Texas this time around than one would have expected, and also Barack Obama. But still, you have about a 10-point gap there, depending on where it is. But it's now you have a Beto O'Rourke running against Lion Ted Cruz. That race, according to some polls, is tightening up. So that's sort of the Texas story. But that's not the whole story. You go into other dominated Republican states. We're waiting to see what happens in Florida, in the West Virginia race there with former Governor Manchin. And that is the senator there now, how well he will do. That's a state that gave, over 40% of the vote, or defeat, I should say, of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton by about 46%. And you get into the Dakotas that voted Republican, and several other areas. So you start looking at some of these areas. Is this dying out? It is in areas that they had the teachers' conflict. You always have to have a grassroots movement. And once you have a grassroots movement, you will get the funding, and you will eventually get the candidates, because you will have the organization. And that has not happened in, say, Texas, as, say, in Oklahoma, in West Virginia, and in Kentucky, and doesn't have the historic Democratic base. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the area where Jerry Pippen was from. There were some progressive candidates that ousted conservatives. So we're seeing more and more of that happen. So that is kind of a prologue to what is happening across the country. And let me get to the midterm elections. This is from the Cook Report. This is Amy Walter writing here. But will it matter for the midterms? It's an ongoing matter in the is this going to matter in the midterm elections? Is a question I get more than any other. I get with increasing regularity. One day it's tariffs, the next day it's the Supreme Court, our family separation at the borders. And now it's Helsinki. That was a meeting between DJ Trump and VI Putin. The instincts of many in the political media is to ask how voters are responding to each of these individual topics. Quickly look and see how voters feel about NAFTA or NATO. Russian interference in the elections, but polling on the issues of controversy de jure failed to appreciate the fact that voters are busy living their lives, unlike pundits and TV panelists. That's true, especially ones in which they don't have any immediate personal relation with the opinions of more normal people. People who don't make a living thinking, talking, and writing about politics are colored by partisanship more than anything else. For example, a survey by PPRI in the Atlantic, that was in June 6th through June 18th, on the Helsinki summit, found despite all the media attention given to the Russian intervention, only 45% of respondents said outside influence from foreign governments is a major problem in American elections. Other opinions ran along starkly partisan line, 68% of the Democrats versus 22% of the Republicans. Voters don't live in issue silos. They don't vote that way either. An election is about the sum, if not the individual path. In 18, voters will either want a Congress to support Trump, turn the cards table on style of government, or to see Congress as a check on Trump. Polls suggest more voters want a check on Trump. And important to remember that despite all the chaos, controversy surrounding this president, his overall approval ratings remain remarkably stable at the silver 35-38 poll tracker shows that from January to July of this year, the president's overall approval ratings fluctuated only 4 points between 39 and 43. In other words, opinions of Trump are set, not in stone, and leads pretty firm cement. The hyperpolarized times with a hyperpolarized president, the more important way to gauge voter sentiment is the intensity of support and opposition to Trump. Do voters strongly approve him or disapprove of him? Republicans this fall as it pretends a more fired up Democratic base. It's hard to measure intensity from polling that comes out on a monthly and quarterly basis, tracking polling there. The Survey Monkey, she uses a lot of polls here, looks at polling. The poll DJ Trump's job rating, including strong approval and disapproval weekly. This means that we get to see how voters' opinions of the president change week to week. Here I found the Survey Monkey polls have found a remarkable consistency in the ratings. Since June, strong approval range from 26 to 28%, while his strong disapproval from 40 to 42%. For the year, his strong approval and strong disapproval vary by 5 points. Not very much. From June to December of 2017, his strong disapproval ratings were 40% range, 45 to 47. The low came in the last half of 2017. The healthcare bill died in the Senate in July. The moocher came and went, and in late July, Charlottesville happened. In August, debate over the fate of the tax bill began in the fall. Tensions with North Korea settling in the spring with the tax bill passed. The rhetoric and relationship with North Korea increased, and the game of White House musical chairs has stopped. Trump's numbers have been on the rise since, and we'll get to that in a minute. Strong approval ratings haven't dipped below 25%. His strong disapprovals haven't broken 42%. Survey Monkey found the percentage who strongly approved declined from 28 to 26%, reversing gains seen over the previous weeks. The question is now, is this the start of a trend, or is it a blimp? Well, very interesting there. Let's look at some current polling here. And we'll go to Real Clear Politics, and as we promised, the state of Georgia. And we'll look at some others from the past week here. This is a WXI from Survey USA. This has Kemp and Cage. One is endorsed by DJ Trump. The other one is endorsed by Governor Dill. Now, Kemp is ahead by 6 in this particular poll, over 40 to 34. And another one here, Kemp versus Abrams. That's Stacey Abrams. She's an African-American running for governor. Kemp has a 2-point margin. And also, if they measured against Cage, he has a 2-point margin of error. Cage at 45, she's at 43. And old DJ Trump has fallen in the Rasmussen outliner at 44%, 55% disapprove there. This was on Friday. On a Thursday, we have the Fox 5 Atlanta, and this is opinion. Savvy did this poll. They have Kemp ahead by 18 points. In Marquette, this is a Democratic primary in Wisconsin. Evans is up by 25 points. And the Marquette Republican primary, Nicholson and Volumar? Anyway, up by 2, very, very close race there. That was on Thursday. And on Wednesday, we had a number of polls here. This is Trafira Group poll, interesting Republican outfit. This is in the state of West Virginia. Meacham versus Morsi. Meacham by 10. In New York State, Fairley versus Gillibrand. There, Quantipic poll. She's up by 27. In New York Senate, another Quantipic poll there. This is Democrat primary, governor primary there. Como and Nixon. Como is up by 36 points. Cynthia Nixon, a progressive candidate there. And in New York, governor race, Como versus Monahan. I think it's Monahan. Oh, no. Milano. Anyway, he's up by 26 points there. And this is this, we haven't gotten there yet. Reuters poll, approval rating is at 42 at Reuters. The approval rating is at 44 at YouGov. This is all on Wednesday. And Rasmussen had him at 46, so he's fallen 2 points. And a generic ballot from Rasmussen, IPOS. Let's see, by 19. That used to be, they now call themselves Ipsos polling. Anyway, Ipsos, we won't even mess with the congressional rating. The direction of country, that is from YouGov. 39% on the right track, 53%. Kind of disregard that one. And what else do we have here? Well, we won't go back there. That's too far back. Let's just quickly dive a little bit into somewhere we have the people from the state of the people from Charlottesville. We'll get it right in a minute here. We'll get that in a minute also. Oh, here we go. Okay, this is the poll that did with the Center for Politics. It's Larry Sabato's shop. The ISOS poll here, just half of Americans believe elections are fair and open. Only about half of American adults believe that elections are fair and open. A large majority of Americans express skepticism about big money in politics in favor disclosure of donations. However, the Senate considered G.J. Trump's nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. The public offers a mixed signals about judiciary intervention. These are some of the takeaways here by a 51 to 43 margin. Those surveys agree with the statement that American elections are fair and open. However, they are a partisan group. 68% of Republicans, just 43% of Democrats agree with that statement. I've always been a little bit skeptical of some of those statements. Do you agree with the following statement that can be heavily weighted? American elections are fair and open. 15% agreed with the statement, 36% somewhat, and 28% somewhat disagreed, strong disagreed 15%, and 6% had no idea. And if you look at the Republicans, Democrats 11%, Republicans 24%, somewhat agree. Democrats 32%, Republicans 44%, Independents 36%. Somewhat disagree. The Independents were 27%, the Republicans 22%, and Democrats again were at 31%. Do you disagree with the following statement? TV political ads should be required to say who paid for them. 87% agree with that. 90% of Democrats, 90% of Republicans, 84% of the Independents. Political ads should be required to say who paid for the ad. Online, 86% agreed, 88% of Democrats, 89% of Republicans, 85% of interest groups should follow the same campaign or election laws as candidates. 75% there, 73% of the Democrats, 81% there, and 75% of the Independents. Recently, a political committee aligned with one of the nation's top leaders accepted $24 million from a single individual. The donation is anonymous, and the law permits that, which comes closest to your view. Such a large anonymous gift is an invitation to go into corruption. 72% agree, 78% of Democrats, only 62% of the Republicans, and 76% of the Independents. People should have a right to give as much as they please and do it anonymously. Only 28% agree with that. 22% of the Democrats and 38% of the Republicans, 24% of the Independents. Do you think the Supreme Court should, all would apply, require disclosure of donations to non-political organizations? 52% agreed, 57% of the Democrats, 46% of the Republicans, and 58% of the Independents. Place limits on the amount of money super PACs can raise and spend. 48% agreed. A total agreement there. 55% of the Democrats, only 42% of the Republicans, 54% of the Independents. Very important to watch always. Place limits on corporate speech. 21% of the total. 29% of the Democrats, only 12% of the Republicans, 25% of the Independents. Eliminating limits on the amount individuals can give to a candidate, 16% there, and of the general, 14% Democrats, 18% there, and 18%. So those are some of the findings. None of the above. 22% there, 16% of the Democrats, and 28% of the Republicans, 16% there. So that is that particular poll. Let me just switch screens here very, very quickly. Don't know how much time we'll have for this one, and then we'll go back and do the sports, we hope. NFL Players Association freezes anthem rule amidst talks. This is from the Hollywood Report, of all things. News comes after a report that the Miami Dolphins players who protested on the field during the anthem could be suspended from up to 4 games under the team's policy this week. A 2-month-old anthem policy is on hold hours after the Associated Press reported that the Miami Dolphins players who protested on the field during the anthem could be suspended for up to 4 games under the team policy issued this week. The league and players issued a joint statement Thursday saying that the two sides are talking things out. The NFL and NFL Players Association recently discussed how working on a resolution on the anthem issue in order to allow constructive dialogue to continue, and we've come to a standstill agreement in the grievance process. No new rules relating to the anthem will be issued or enforced for the next several weeks while the confidential discussions continue. The issue has dominated headlines over the past 2 seasons. The NFL rule, which was passed in May, forbids players from sitting or standing or taking knees if they are on the field, sideline during the Star Spangled Banner, which is unconstitutional. None of these team policies have been made public until AP obtained a copy of what the 9-pager from the Miami Dolphins. It includes a 1-sentence section, proper anthem conduct, that was provided to the AP by a person familiar with the policy, who insists on anonymity. The Dolphins said in a statement the NFL requires each team to submit their rules regarding the anthem. In other words, there would be 30-something different rules. Can choose not to issue any suspensions or any fines to any player guilty of misconduct detrimental to the club. Others cite violations labeling drug use and post-season gambling, breaking curfew, etc. Riding a motorcycle, very important thing there. We call those. The Jets' acting owner, Christopher Johnson, said shortly after the league announced its policy that he would not punish players in any peaceful protest. The Dolphin veterans like Kenny Stills took a knee with hand on his heart during the anthem. And let's see here, Jordan Phillips put his arm around Stills before one of the games. Players are not on the field during the anthem performance must stand and show that are on the field, and respect for the flag and anthem. Anyway, critics led by DJ Trump called the players unpatriotic, even said NFL owners should fine any player who refuses to stand. DJ Trump doesn't understand the Constitution. Some players have counted that that these actions were being misconstrued. Trump's criticism led to more than 200 players to protest during a one weekend and kept it up throughout the season. The league's coalition of players have been working in tandem to support player initiatives for a variety of issues. The NFL is committing $90 million of blood money, in my thing, over the next season to social justice causes and free segment plans that involve league players. Mr. Kopanek, we don't want to forget him, did not play last season and still hasn't been picked by another team. He threw 16 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions in 2016. Eric Reed, one of Kopanek's former teammates and another protester, is still out of work. And the NFL Players Association, incidentally, this was from the Associated Press on the 20th of July. And let's just 1 minute here. We don't want to leave anything out. Oh, in Florida, since we were talking about a lot of polling, this is youth voting there went up by 41% after Parkland. A significant number of young people are registered to vote in Florida. Analysis by Target Smart, a data firm that works on behalf of Democrats, has shown that the share of newly registered Florida voters between 18 and 29 increased by 8 percentage points in 2.5 months after the Valentine's Day massacre. Voters between 18 and 29 make up 26% of all new registrations in Florida. In 2.5 months after the shooting, the youth vote made up 34.22%. Total number of young people registered to vote went up in Florida from the 1st of December 2017 to February 14, 2018 by 27,000. Between the 14th and May, 39,000. That is Target Smart. A new generation of political leaders emerged in the aftermath of Parkland. That is very good. That's the CEO there, Bonner of Target Smart. We'll have to rely upon them more. This is at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And we're appreciative there of Mr. David Hogg and Emma Gomez. So we'll end this up. Is touring the nation as part of the March for Life movement. Cheer the news of that young people will vote. He tweeted, and this is a very good situation, period. As the National Rifle Association, who is now sorted up in the Russian spy incident. So things are changing, and they will continue to change. Let's do the sports. Incidentally, if you go to Major League Baseball TV, the broadcasts are free this week. I should qualify that as a saying that. Let's go over here, and we'll get the baseball scores. We got the World Cup out of the way. We got basketball out of the way, and we're left with baseball. But nonetheless, on Friday, we had the Cardinals at the Cubs in Wrigley Field. That score, the Cardinals had 18 runs, 8 hits and 1 error, and the Cubs 5 runs and 10 hits and no errors. Didn't do them any good. The loser there was Mr. John Lester. The Mets and Yankees in New York, obviously 7-5. The Mets finally won a game there. Sattergaard was the winner. Mr. German was the loser. Anyway, Atlanta and the Nationals in Washington. Atlanta won that game 8-5. The Padres and Phillies in the city of brotherly love. Phillies 11-5. The Phillies are starting actually to win games. And in 10, the Orioles and Blue Jays in Toronto. Toronto pulled that out 8-6. The line score there. The Blue Jays had 11 hits, 2 errors, and the Orioles, who sent Mr. Matty Machado on to the Dodgers, 10 hits and 1 error. The Red Sox and Tigers in the Motor City. Red Sox shut out the Tigers 2-0. The Pirates and Reds. Pirates at 12-1. The Marlins and Rays, a battle of Florida. The Marlins came out on top of that 6-5. And in 11, Cleveland and the Rangers in Texas. Cleveland 9-8. Each had 17 hits, no errors. The Dodgers and Brewers in Milwaukee. I guess the Brewers drank too much beer. The Dodgers 6-4. I don't know if Matty Machado did anything or not, but Mr. Rick Hill was the winner. Mr. Jansen done what he does good. I saw him make that final. The Twins and Royals in Kansas City. Royals 6-5 over the Twins. The line score that Twins had 10 hits, no errors, and the Royals 8 hits and 1 error and still won the game. The Giants and Athletics in the Coliseum. Giants are 5-1. A game we also looked at. The Rockies and D-backs. That was a very interesting game there. And the Rockies won the game. They're the visiting team. D-backs 11-10. Let's give the line score here. The Rockies had 12 hits, 2 errors, and the D-backs 14 hits and 1 error. Archie Bradley Jr. Was a loser. He doesn't lose very many games. And Oberg was the winner. Novano got the save there, barely. The White Sox and Mariners in Seattle, Mariners 3-1. And the Astros and Angels in California. The Astros are still winning ways there. 3-1 over the Angels. So on we go. Mr. Kershaw was the winner there. And that will do it for Major League Baseball. Back after the break. We'll return on Monday morning on the Boston Red Network. Of course, it's Boston Red. The Monday morning quarterback. This weekend we'll have Numbers Man as part of the Boston Red Network, and WBRN radio and an open source report. We'll get all of that finally done. Incidentally, we've now moved on to Spotify. I noticed most of the Boston Red Network is there. Boston Red, Numbers Man is there, BR on the World is there, and All About Sports made it over there also, and we've been doing pretty good over there. We're on iHeartRadio, the iHeart app, over 800 stations to choose from there, and Stitcher, another service that we do well on. We are also on YouTube, the audio version. We will get a video version out soon, and incidentally, we're on Stitcher, and Blog Talk will in August come back to a short talk show format. We haven't done that in a few years now, but we'll get one in and see how it works out, and we'll tell you beforehand. I'm not sure we'll be able to tell you the exact date, but we will put that up there, and we'll play around with it a bit. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback.